Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the October edition of the ACS Industry Insights series. My name is Jo Stewart-Rattray, and I'm the Chief Security Officer at Silverchain Group, and I also am actively involved with ACS in the community's portfolio. I'm also the Oceania Regional Ambassador for ISACA, having served on its International Board of Directors for some 7 years. It's a great honour to host today's webinar, and I'd like to, without any further ado, acknowledge country. This is always a very important thing I believe that we need to do, and I would like to acknowledge the Ngadjuri people of the mid-north of South Australia as the traditional owners of the land upon which I am coming to you from today. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and to all Aboriginal elders from other communities who may be in attendance today, and from people from any other lands, Aboriginal lands, who are joining us today as well. So if we can just have a look at the agenda for today. Okay, so we don't have one of those. ACS is actually really excited to be growing our partnership with ISACA, as both organisations are dedicated to combining knowledge and resources. And my goodness, we have people coming in from all over the place, including Seattle, Washington, I see. We're on a mission to enhance technology governance, bolster cybersecurity standards, and provide top-notch professional development opportunities for our constituency bases, which is, of course, across the world. Our goal is to cultivate a thriving digital ecosystem here in Australia as well as globally. When we approach the audience Q&A component, make sure that you use the Q&A box on your Zoom screen. And do take an opportunity to ask questions that you may have. We will try our very best to get to all of the questions, but depending on how many there are, it may not be possible to do so. And I've just seen somebody coming in from Maryland as well. Welcome to all our US colleagues. I'd now like to introduce today's speaker to you. Sophia and I have worked together often, and she's an absolute knowledge base in her own right in this space. And so Sophia Kazi is the Principal Privacy Professional Practices Principal at ISACA. So I'm going to hand it straight to you without any further ado. And we're going to have a bit of a chat. Sophia is going to be presenting some great material, but she's also going to be just getting a bit of an Oceania spin on it as well. So we'll have a bit of a conversation as we go through. So welcome, everybody, and welcome, Sophia. Great to have you again.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. Let me just share my PowerPoint. All right. Let me just change that. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me to the ACS. Thank you, Jo, for joining us today. I'm really excited to kind of get your perspective on ISACA's 2025 State of Cybersecurity Survey. So what we're going to go over today are basically the results of ISACA's survey. We'll talk about some trends that we're seeing as far as cybersecurity staffing, hiring. We'll talk about cyber attacks and some common threat actors. And then the elephant in the room, we will address AI and the way it might or might not impact cybersecurity professionals. Before we really get into the results of the survey, though, I did want to just kind of go over some of the demographic information. So we have been doing this survey for several years, so we will be doing some longitudinal comparisons with what we've seen in previous years. As you can see here, we have had survey respondents from all over the world. In general, most of the slides are going to have information from a global perspective. Unless otherwise noted, I will call out Oceania as applicable. In many cases, the Oceania results were quite similar to what we saw globally, but there were some very interesting areas where there were a couple of differences. And so with that, let's just get right into it with workforce and talent pipeline. I'm going to spend a while on this section simply because I think it's really important because the work of cybersecurity professionals is greatly shaped based on what we're seeing in the workforce and talent and hiring. And so with that, we'll start off with open cybersecurity roles. So the percentage of respondent enterprises that have open entry-level positions is actually the same as last year at 18%, whereas the percentage of respondents with open non-entry-level roles is 1 point higher than what we saw in 2024. This may not be entirely surprising, but it tends to take a bit more time to find the right, most qualified person for a non-entry-level cybersecurity role compared to an entry-level positions. Globally, 13% of our respondents say it takes more than 6 months to find somebody for an entry-level cybersecurity position, whereas 25% of our respondents say it takes more than 6 months to find the right person for a non-entry-level role. However, this is an area where Oceania differs a bit. Only 14% of respondents in Oceania say that filling these non-entry-level positions takes more than 6 months. Joe, I'd like to hear from you. This time to hire, is this surprising or is this kind of in line with what you're seeing as far as hiring times and finding the right person for the job?
I have to say, Sophia, unfortunately, this is pretty standard. As a CISO, I'm often hiring, and it can take an extraordinary amount of time. In fact, I had one role recently that it took me 8 months to find somebody. And the problem is that so I think some of the issue that we face is that some of our universities are actually advertising, go into cyber. It's a terrific career path, and it is, but you can earn top dollar. So graduates come expecting, 180,000 plus as an entry level position, and of course that's not the case. That's actually not the reality of our world. So I think there's that is an issue. Also, people changing careers but not having done any credentialing or any experience in the space. That's very difficult to employ those people for mid-level jobs. If it's an entry-level job, yes, you can. But so I think this is what takes the time, is actually weeding through to find the people who are the best fit for the role that you're actually looking to hire for. In fact, as I say, I think 8 months is the longest it's taken, but on average for me, it's been 6 months to find somebody.
Wow. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but it seems like that is kind of consistent with what you are seeing as well.
Absolutely.
So if we shift gears a little bit, this is also probably not very surprising, but the most of our respondents, the largest percentage of open roles are for individual contributors who are more technical. As we get more and more senior, we see fewer and fewer respondents who say that they have open positions. This makes sense. Organizations likely just have one CISO, but may employ many individual technical contributors. Interestingly, only 31% of our survey respondents said that a majority of applicants were actually qualified for the position they applied to. 23% said that a quarter or fewer applicants were well qualified. So to put this in other words, 23% of our survey respondents said 75% or more of people who were applying to a cybersecurity role were unqualified. I'm not sure if this speaks to hiring managers maybe having unrealistic expectations. Perhaps, Joe, you were talking about salary. Perhaps they're asking for a lot of qualifications that should ask for a higher salary range, perhaps. Or it's possible that some cybersecurity candidates just don't quite know how to leverage an interview or a resume to really demonstrate their experience. Joe, can you weigh in on that?
Yeah, I think there's another point we need to consider. I was actually at an event in Birmingham in the UK just recently, and a recruiter was talking about the use of AI to wade through applications. So oftentimes CVs are being rejected because AI doesn't recognise the qualifications or indeed the experience that individuals have. So we almost have to learn how to rewrite our CVs to account for that. So I think that's one of the other issues we have to look at. But absolutely, I get a lot of people who have a networking background who think, I know about networks, so therefore I must know about security. And you know, when you say to them, well, what experience have you had specifically in security? The answer is often no, I haven't had any. But they would love to be in security because, as I said, it seemed to be a very groovy place to be. Actually, we both know that it's just hard work, but it's not Star Wars as some people seem to think.
Yeah. Okay. So that's actually kind of a perfect transition, because one of the other questions on our survey was about candidate qualification. What is it that makes a candidate qualified? So the percentages here indicate the percentage of respondents who said that a particular factor was very important. There are a few factors here that have an asterisk and no comparison with 2024. That's because these are new factors that we added this year, and we're glad that we did, because there is a new top factor: adaptability. This is now even higher than what was first place last year, prior cybersecurity work experience, which surprisingly dropped 13 points. Then in third place was, again, a new factor: organizational fit, you know, ensuring somebody's a good fit with the culture, perhaps other people on the team. Here is, however, an area where I'd like to talk about the Oceania stats a little bit more. Among our respondents in Oceania, organizational fit was actually 64% compared to 56% globally. And then the last factor on this list globally, recommendation from a previous employer, is 16% globally, but was 21% for Oceania. Joe, can we talk about some of these factors? Is any of this surprising to you, or does this track with what you're looking for when you're trying to find somebody?
Yeah, I find it interesting because for me, organisational fit is really, really important, and team fit. So I go through a three-stage process of interviewing. The first interview is just a meet and greet, just to see how that person is able to speak, you know, talk about security generally, talk about themselves, their background. So just very like a very basic kind of catch up, essentially. Then we have a formal interview where I will have, you know, one or two of my colleagues come interview with me. But the very final stage is a virtual morning tea or afternoon tea with the key players in my team. And I introduce the person and I introduce my team, and then I step off the call and I let them go for it, because these are the people who are going to have to work day to day with that individual. So if they're a great fit, then my team are going to come back to me and say, we love this person, as happened recently. We love this person. We want her to start straight away. So fantastic. So that to me is a different approach, but it gives you what you need, gives you an understanding of their interpersonal skills, or sometimes called soft skills, their technical understanding, and indeed their cultural fit.
Yeah, we are going to talk a lot more about soft skills in just a bit, so I am glad you mentioned that. Okay, let's shift gears. We were curious about stress, and Joe alluded to this before, but cybersecurity jobs are a lot of work. 37% of our survey respondents say that their role is significantly more stressful now than it was 5 years ago. That's up 2 points compared to last year. So we asked why, and the top factor, it was the top factor last year as well, is that the threat landscape is increasingly complex. 63% cited it as a stressor, which is high, but I want to note last year it was 81%. This is almost a 20-point drop. I'm just going to ask that you keep this top stressor in the back of your mind, because throughout this presentation, I have a few possible explanations for why we saw an 18-point drop in this stressor. Tied for second place as stressors are unrealistic expectations, too much work, and then work-life balance as well. Oceania had some interesting differences here. 57% of our respondents in the Oceania region said that unrealistic expectations or too much work were a stressor. 45% cited work-life balance, and then 32% said staff not being sufficiently trained was a stressor. Joe, do you feel like your job is more stressful now compared to 5 years ago? And what are some of the factors that are making jobs feel harder in cybersecurity?
That's a good question. It's a hard question to answer too. I think I've been in the security space for over 20 over 20 years, nearly too many to count, really. But I have seen that it was very stressful to begin with, and part of that was I was one of very few women, particularly in a technical background. Things changed, and it's sort of we hit a middle ground, and there was an acceptance that security was a real thing, just as the privacy is finding issues at the moment was trying to get its traction. Same thing happened with security, and then we did hit our straps, and everything was good. Then the bad guys got tougher and harder, and we had nation state actors, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, it has gotten much more stressful, and I would say that I have noticed an uptick in the last 18 months in this part of the world. And I think that's probably since we had the big breaches of the Medibank breach a couple of years ago, and Optus, et cetera. I think since we've had those, it's become very clear that Australia is a target, and Australian business is a target. So therefore our jobs have become harder because we're being hit on by the rest of the world. And also, you know, we're in the middle of how many conflicts around the world that also is playing into that space as well. And some of those are cyber conflicts. So yes, I do think my job has gotten tougher. I think that we have to expect the unexpected these days. You think you know what to be looking for, but you see different things all the time.
Absolutely. And, you know, one of the reasons we talked about stress and we asked some questions about stress in the survey is because we're worried about burnout. Burned out employees are less likely to be engaged in their work, and they're more likely to make mistakes. So knowing that, it's a bit surprising that a quarter of our survey respondents said that their organization wasn't doing anything to mitigate burnout. That being said, among organizations that are taking steps to address burnout, they're offering flexibility. They're encouraging people to get away from work for a while, whether that's a vacation or some kind of a sabbatical. They might also be rebalancing workloads. And I want to note in Oceania, we saw a bit more flexibility, at least among our respondents in Oceania, with 65% of them saying that they are offered flexible work arrangements and 54% saying that their employer offers them breaks and encourages vacation time. It's critical, really, to address stress because it's the most common reason why people leave their job. This year, 47% of our survey respondents said that a cybersecurity professional may leave their job because of high work stress. Interestingly, last year, half of survey respondents said that cybersecurity professionals left their job because they were recruited by other companies. That dropped 5 points this year. Globally, though, in Oceania, 52% of our respondents in that region said that recruitment by other companies was a reason why people may leave their cybersecurity profession. Of course, there are a lot of other factors, including a lack of management support, limited remote work possibilities, but also perhaps just not being the right work culture or environment. Again, this is kind of talking about that organizational fit piece. It goes both ways. It's the employer fitting well with an employee, but also the employee being happy with where they are working. And so I want to also touch on retention. This year, half of our survey respondents say they're having difficulties retaining qualified cybersecurity professionals. We started asking about this question in 2020, and you will see that it's currently at the lowest percentage it has been since we've started asking this question. Okay, so if we think about that, plus the fact that globally it appears that retention by other companies is down, we are starting to see a picture of a very challenging cybersecurity job market. Stress is up, but not many people are leaving their positions. There's a trend that's not actually just limited to cybersecurity. We're seeing it in many different industries called the big stay, in which people may not be entirely happy with their role. Perhaps they are curious about another position, but due to safety or security or stability, they're staying in their current role just because of other factors that may make leaving and going to another enterprise seem a bit scary. So Oceania was actually right on track with what we saw globally as far as retention difficulties, but you'll note that in certain regions like Latin America, Africa, and some parts of Asia, retention was a bit higher. One of the reasons people may stay is because of benefits. And one of the key benefits that a lot of our survey respondents identified is their employer offering professional development training. This year, 60% of our respondents globally said their organization offers professional development training. In Oceania, this jumps to 66%. Okay, so about 5 minutes ago, I was talking about the top stressors, and if you'll recall, the top stressor of a complicated threat landscape went down almost 20 points compared to last year. I think this increase in professional development training may be one possible factor as to why we're seeing that. I think enterprises understand that the threat landscape is complex. There are some new technologies that cybersecurity professionals may want to learn about in order to best do their job to the best of their ability. So I think that may suggest why we're seeing that top stressor still be a stressor, but not as bad as what we saw last year. Concerningly, though, we saw an 11-point drop in employers who are paying for employee certification fees and a 5-point drop in organizations that are providing some kind of tuition reimbursement. Now, the fourth biggest reason why people were leaving their jobs, according to our survey, was poor financial benefits. And we see that here. If you've worked hard to earn a certification or you're halfway through a degree and all of a sudden your employer stops paying for it, odds are you're not going to let that certification lapse or drop out. Instead, you'll pay for it out of pocket, which in turn essentially looks like a pay cut. All right, let's get to some skill gaps. I'm really excited to talk to Jo about this and get some of her feedback, but the top skill gap identified by our survey respondents, it was the top skill gap identified last year, was soft skills. I know people want information on AI and the newest technologies and getting hands-on technical training. And while that's absolutely valuable, we are seeing time and time again, people are looking for soft skills among cybersecurity professionals. If we take a deeper dive into the specific soft skills that cybersecurity professionals need, we see critical thinking, communication, problem solving, teamwork, and then once again, that adaptability piece is also important. Now, I was a bit surprised that only 29% of our survey respondents said that integrity and honesty were important soft skills. I think it's easy to think of cybersecurity professionals as doing work that's very black and white, yes, no, definitive, but that's not necessarily the case. We've seen some big organizations not be entirely truthful about breaches that have happened, or perhaps try to cover them up, which has led to expensive penalties, reputational damage, in some cases, criminal sentencing. So given that, I find it a bit surprising that less than a third of our survey respondents said that integrity and honesty are important among cybersecurity professionals. Jo, let's talk a bit more about soft skills. Why should cybersecurity professionals be thinking about soft skills, and what role could it have for them in their careers?
I'm just going to say, first of all, I think these are the hardest skills, right? I don't see them as soft skills. I actually see them as the hardest skills that you can attain. For some of us, these are not natural. We are not, naturally gregarious people. So they become very difficult. So I think that these are the hardest things. And for some people, learning this stuff is very hard. So it all goes into part of the problem that we have. I mean, I had somebody at interview say to me, I just want to sit in the back room. I don't want to have to talk with people. Well, I'm from the kind of organisation where we might pick up the phone, and I know it's certainly happened to me many times, pick up the phone, and it's the CEO who wants a piece of information that I need to then link her up with one of my team. And for them, that can be quite frightening to be talking to the person who sits at the top of a 6,500 person organisation spread across the country. So it's really important, because in a lot of organisations today, you never know when it might be even the board chair who rings you and says, I just really want to know about X, Y, and Z. So I think, to me, those interpersonal skills are really important. I don't think that you could be in a role in security without being a critical thinker. And I think most technologists will do things like they make assessments during the course of their day, and it might be a risk assessment, but they don't formalise it. But it's part of that critical thinking process that we use. So that's something that I think is also we need to take into consideration. Communication is 100% important, whether that be written or verbal, and it needs to also be, you need to be accessible to people. That was one of the things that I certainly learned through the pandemic, was that my door was always open. My virtual door was always open if people had queries, because they were feeling quite vulnerable in the workplace, because they'd been thrown home to work rather than being in the office environment. Problem solving, of course, I mean, what we do by virtue of technology and virtue of the work we do in security, it has to be a problem solving capability, and teamwork. I don't know how you do it without teamwork, because everybody fills a different role. They might cross-pollinate, but I think that's the beauty of having a great team, is the fact that they do work together and they care about one another. So that's the other thing. You can't live in isolation. You have to be part of a team. Again, that's not always a natural thing for people, particularly if we're looking at workers who are neurodivergent. Sometimes it's quite difficult for them not to feel a sense of isolation in the workplace. So we need to be inclusive in that respect as well. As far as adaptability and flexibility is concerned, I have not worked in the office for more than 1 or 2 days since 2020. So this is home, this is where I work. And for me, my team is across the country. So there'd be no point me driving to the office every day, because I'd be sitting there by myself with all the healthcare professionals. So I think that it's not just about where we work, or it's how we work, and it's who we work with, and what we can bring to it. That gives that level of adaptability and flexibility.
Absolutely. Thank you. So let's shift gears now to talk about cybersecurity operations and what cybersecurity looks like in practice. So many organizations have a Chief Information Security Officer, or CISO. In fact, 3/4 of our respondents to this survey say that they have a CISO. And on this slide, we've listed who the CISO reports to. I do want to note that when we looked at organizations that had fewer employees or had lower revenues, they were a bit less likely to have a CISO. And so if the enterprise doesn't have one, the security team is going to have to report to a different leader. So the most common people in that case are the Chief Information Officer, the Chief Technology Officer, and the Chief Executive Officer. So Joe alluded to this. We were talking about soft skills and the importance of being able to speak to a variety of people. If the leader of the security team doesn't report to a CISO and perhaps reports to a CEO, being able to clearly communicate cybersecurity, perhaps technical topics, to a person who may not speak the language of cybersecurity is so vital to ensure that the security team has the different resources that it may need. And then on that note, we had a question on our survey about budget funding. We asked how people felt about their cybersecurity budget. A few people felt that it was overfunded, but quite a few believed that their budget was underfunded. Just over half of respondents, it was 53%, said that it was somewhat or significantly underfunded. This is high, but it is actually a slight improvement from what we saw in 2024, when 59% said that their cybersecurity budget was underfunded. A couple Oceania cuts, 35% of respondents in Oceania said that their cybersecurity budget was somewhat underfunded, and then 11% said that it was significantly underfunded. We also asked our survey respondents, how, if at all, will your cybersecurity budget change within the next 12 months? And unfortunately, optimism is down. Fewer respondents believe that their cybersecurity budget will increase, and we have a higher percentage of respondents who think that their budget will somewhat or significantly decrease. As far as Oceania goes, 15% of respondents in Oceania said that their cybersecurity budget would somewhat decrease in the next 12 months, and 1% said it would significantly decrease. Joe, I'd like to hear from you. What are some of the consequences associated with budget cuts or just inadequate funding as it is?
I always say you can't expect a return on investment if at first you don't invest. So, and the other thing that I say is that if you keep asking for more audits, but you're not investing, so you keep asking for more reviews on what's happening in cybersecurity, and you expect a different result, there's a little bit of insanity involved in that, right? Because you can't expect that. So I think that organisations are putting themselves at risk. I think that there comes a time when there's a level of complacency. So they think they don't have to spend more money. Oh, look, we spent XT last year, so we don't need to spend that this year. Well, that's not the way it works. We have to get it right 99.9% of the time. And the bad guys only have to get it right 0.1% of the time to make our lives miserable and to damage the brand, or in fact destroy the brand or the brand of that you have worked so hard to protect for so long. So that to me is, I think it's a folly to not be funding security enough. It also should be seen as separate to technology budget as well. I'm a great believer in there being that segregation between technology and security. You can't have it all being the same stack. So there are going to be budgetary impacts on that. And as your organisation grows, there will also be budgetary impact, because everything is on subscription these days. I nearly said prescription. Anyway, but it is, so that means that if you acquire another organisation, or indeed if you have a recruitment drive, that's going to mean that there's a greater cost in protecting your organisation as well. So yeah, I think we have to be looking at a year-on-year increase that's reasonable.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, this is something that comes up in the State of Cybersecurity survey report that we do, but also our State of Privacy report. Unfortunately, some of these budgets are just underfunded, and, it's important to fund, but again, it sometimes is hard to quantify. Why do we need to make these investments?
That's right. And I think it's not just underfunded as far as the dollars spent is concerned. It's also about the resourcing, the actual physical resourcing. Mm-hmm. And sometimes CISOs have to jump through hoops to get an extra resource, an extra human resource, or indeed a platform that's going to ease some of the burden and the stressors on their staff. So that's the other thing to be very much aware of.
Absolutely. And, that kind of brings us to our next area of cyber risk and cyber attacks. So we asked our survey respondents, compared to last year, do you feel you are experiencing more cyber attacks, fewer attacks, the same? And 35% said they were experiencing more attacks, which seems high. It is a 3-point drop from last year. So this, again, I think is a possible contributing factor as to why fewer respondents say that the threat landscape is a significant stressor for them. I think some organizations just aren't experiencing as many attacks. Interestingly, though, of our respondents in Oceania, 41% say they are experiencing more attacks. Joe, is this surprising to you? 35% of people saying that they're experiencing more attacks. Would you expect it to be higher, lower, or is this kind of what you had expected?
I wonder if people are aware that they are actually being attacked. That's the other thing. We see it's going to depend on your platform. It's going to depend on the monitoring that you have in place. And there's always somebody knocking on the door. Now, is that an attack? What do you classify as an attack as well? Does it have to be a brute force attack before you call it an attack, or is it an event or an incident prior to that? So that's the other thing too. I think we need to get some clarification about what these things actually mean. What is an attack? If it's a breach, that's a different thing altogether. So, and I would suggest that's a very high number if it were a breach. So I'm thinking this could be incidents, and this could be events as well. So, or the knocking on the door. Everybody's having their doors knocked on. So again, that's a low number. But if it's a genuine attack, it's a high number. So I think we need, it's going to be a horses for courses on this one.
Yeah, I think the data supports you too. 17% of respondents said they don't know. So yes, it is that question of, are we being attacked? What is this attack? Yeah.
Yes,
absolutely.
Exactly.
And so that kind of brings me to the next point. We asked, of people who said that they had experienced an attack in the last year, which of the following threat actors were to blame? Cyber criminals, like last year, topped the list. It's down 3 points, but it is still the most common threat actor, followed by hackers, nation and state. And I do want to note, as far as Oceania goes, it was pretty comparable with what we saw globally. And if we get a bit more specific into attack vectors, the most common, social engineering. Once again, people can often be the weakest point. Surprisingly, only 19% of respondents said that cyber attacks were confirmed or believed to be AI driven, and almost a third, 31%, said they don't know if cyber attacks were AI driven. So this could mean that it doesn't necessarily matter if a phishing email was written with ChatGPT or if a person wrote it. Incident response may look the same regardless of whether or not AI was involved. Joe, any other insights on, attack vectors or the use of AI in attacks?
I think bots have been being used forever in attacks, particularly those old fashioned, that we used to call them war driving. It's that sort of, when it's now brute force, it's that sort of continual thing. Well, a human being can't be sitting there doing this. It has to be automated in some way. So certainly bots have been involved with that more and more over time. And I don't think we're going to see that change. I think that's just going to be par for the course. And how do we keep them out? Because we know that with some of these threats that we're seeing at the moment, once they're in, it's very hard to get them out. I mean, scattered spider is one of those. There's been nation state attacks as well, which have caused all sorts of issues that they actually just get into the system. They sit there to gather the data that they want. And of course, the other thing is too, they'll gather the data. They might get out with the data that they want, and they will just hold that data until such time as we are in a position with quantum or something similar to be able to crack the algorithms around protecting that data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we asked in our survey, how likely is it that you'll experience an attack in the next 12 months? And concerningly, a lot of people say that it is very likely or likely. If we look at our respondents in Oceania, 23% said it was very likely, whereas likely was the same at 26%. So given how many survey respondents think an attack is likely or very likely, it's a bit concerning that confidence in detecting and responding to cyber threats is as low as it is. Only 41% of respondents say they're completely or very confident in their cybersecurity team's ability to detect and respond to cyber threats. In Oceania, only 2% are completely confident and 33% are very confident. Joe, I'm really curious about this because this question's really about a feeling. So what are some of the factors that might lead to teams feeling confident in being able to detect and respond to cyber threats?
I think some of it's about having confidence in their own team. It's having confidence in the tools that they're using, tools and platforms that they're using in their work. I think it's about the level of training that they've got. So I think it's a lot about the things that we've already seen. It's also about management support at the highest level within the organisation, and that might go all the way to the board of directors. Are they being supported in the work? Is there an understanding of what this means? Particularly, what does it mean to a director sitting on a board if that organisation is breached? So it goes right to the top of the food chain and all the way back down. So I think that to feel confident, you have to have all of those ducks in a row, which means that there's often a lot of educative work to be done. And I always say that as far as I'm concerned, as a CISO, education and communication are two of the most important things that I do across the organisation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, moving on. We asked a question to our survey respondents. How often is a cyber risk assessment performed on your organization? 40% say they're doing it annually. Interestingly, we had 11% who say they're doing it monthly. I do want to note 12% said they don't know. It's possible it's people who are newer to the organization who answered the survey, or perhaps they're more individual contributors, not really at a management level, so they don't have insight into cyber risk assessments. But when we looked at some of the obstacles when it comes to actually doing a cyber risk assessment, the biggest is the time commitment. This was followed by just not having enough personnel to perform the assessment. So these top two were the top two responses last year as well, as far as obstacles to conducting a cyber risk assessment, but they're slightly down from last year when they were 41% and 37% respectively. Okay, so again, if you'll recall when we were talking about stressors, the top one, which was down almost 20 points from last year, was the complex threat landscape. Well, this may speak to some of that. I think some organizations, at least now, it feels like they have a bit more time and personnel to be doing cyber risk assessments at the scope or at the frequency that is ideal, that perhaps makes the threat landscape not feel quite so intimidating as it may have when you don't have the resources to be properly doing cyber risk assessments. All right, and we will wrap up with talking a bit about AI and cybersecurity. So in this survey, we had a two-pronged approach to how we asked questions around it. We were curious about how security professionals were using AI, but also how cybersecurity professionals were shaping the way that their organization more broadly was using and adopting AI tools. So by and large, we saw an increase in the use of AI tools for security operations. And to be fair, some of these aren't entirely new. They've been around for a while, but we saw 32% of survey respondents say they're using it to automate threat detection and response, 30% using it for endpoint security, and 28% automating routine security tasks. Interestingly, it appears that there is a bit of a correlation between doing cyber risk and adopting AI. 44% of our survey respondents who say they don't, among our respondents who never conduct cyber risk assessments, 44% say they don't use AI for any of the tasks listed in this survey, which suggests that they understand that AI tools are not without their own risk. And if they're not able to conduct risk assessments for other tools or other products or platforms, adopting AI is not going to be a panacea. It's not going to improve headcount. It may not necessarily give you more time back in the day to do the work you need to do. So I think this is a pretty good finding. Oceania was actually quite comparable with what we saw globally. Joe, what's your take on this? Do you feel like AI is or isn't drastically changing the work of cybersecurity professionals?
I think that we've been using AI for a long time and people are not aware of it. Many of the tools that they use have AI embedded in them. A lot of the SOCs that we're using are using AI. So from that perspective, I think it's been there. I think that it will get to the point where some of the more mundane jobs will change because we can use AI, but that's going to be dependent on the organisation. There are a whole lot of factors involved. We've seen this before where we're sort of told the sky is about to fall and you're all going to lose your jobs. I'm not entirely sure that that's true, but I do think as employers that we need to be aware that we may need to be looking at reskilling or upskilling or changing the skills of our teams in order to be able to meet the needs moving forward. And that includes the use of AI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was kind of the one part of what we looked at with security and AI. But next, what we looked at was if or how security professionals are shaping the way that AI is used at their organization. This year, 40% of our survey respondents say that they or somebody on their team was involved in developing, onboarding, or implementing AI. That is fantastic. That's 11 points higher than what we saw last year. As AI evolves and as more and more service providers begin to tack AI onto their products, it becomes imperative that security professionals, if they value security by design, are involved in incorporating these AI tools. Especially if we think about something like an AI agent, it becomes so important that cybersecurity professionals are involved in the agent's capabilities. Not very long ago, one organization had an AI agent delete their entire live database without seeking any human input. And I would hope that if security professionals were involved in adopting that agent, they would ensure that there were some controls in place to limit that. Joe, what are your thoughts on this?
Absolutely 100% agree, Sophia. One of the things that my team spends a lot of time doing is evaluations and assessments of the use of AI across the organisation. So, we have to look at the consequences. So we've developed an evaluation toolkit, if you like, that we can then risk rate each of those as well. And if there are certain things in place, then we recommend against, or we suggest to our architecture review board that we will not be endorsing it, or that we will endorse it with these conditions, and there'll be quite strict conditions that as to how that particular tool can be used.
Great. Yeah. So, on that note, we also asked our survey respondents, were you or somebody on your team involved in developing a policy governing the use of AI in your organization? This year, it was 47%, up from 35% last year. This upward trend is absolutely reason for some cautious optimism. It suggests that organizations understand that AI is not necessarily applicable in every use case, for every department, for every single type of data. I think, we were talking about how the threat landscape is not as intimidating and it's still the top stressor, but not as bad as it was last year. I think that's because of this. I think this time last year, a lot of people who were replying to this survey were dealing with shadow IT. There were other business units that were so heavily reliant on tools that they needed to do their work, but didn't have vetted by a security team. But I think because security professionals are increasingly having a seat at the table for conversations around AI and how to safely and responsibly use it, the threat landscape doesn't seem quite as hard, and cybersecurity professionals don't necessarily find themselves butting heads with other part of the organization as they may have previously. Joe, any final thoughts on this before we wrap up?
I think you've just nailed it, because that's exactly right. It is about that cross-organizational communication on this stuff, right? We need to know what's going on. And I always say that security needs to be involved from ideation to implementation and beyond. And if I could have that on a T-shirt, I would, or indeed on a superhero cape, because that's the way it needs to play out, right? We can actually save the organization some heartache if we're involved early, if something doesn't look to be particularly secure, or the way the AI tools are being used, or that it's being shipped out into the wild and processed elsewhere, all of that sort of stuff. So I think that development of policy to protect all of that is incredibly important. So get security teams involved early so that they can have input into it. Absolutely.
Yes, could not agree more. Well, that is all we have time to present. There's so much more in this survey report. It's a free download. You can access it at the link on your screen. And with that, we have some time for questions.
Yes, and we do have quite a few that have come in. I've got one here that's, from your experience, how challenging is it for professionals from non-cyber backgrounds to transition into the field? Okay. Do you want to go, or do you want me to go?
You go first.
All right. So I think it's about, if you're from a non-cyber background, what technology do you have in your background? It might be that you do have a tech background, and so it's transferable. The other thing about that is that, are you prepared to do some study? Have you done some study already? So all of that plays into it. It depends on the role that you're going for. It depends on the organisation. It depends on what their value set around security is. So I hope that answers that question. Sophia, do you have anything else to add to that?
We were talking a lot about the importance of soft skills, and I think that just really shows that you might be an amazing problem solver and you're great at communicating. You may not necessarily have the cyber skills, but like Joe, like you said, the soft skills are potentially harder to teach than some of those more technical skills. So I think it's absolutely reasonable for people to get into cybersecurity, even if that's not, what their degree was in or what they've been doing previously.
And I think that's a really good point, because cyber is not just hardcore tech. There's a whole lot of other stuff around it as well. So I think that's the thing to consider as well. What are you looking for in cyber? Are you looking to do cyber awareness? Well, in which case, yes, you need to have an understanding of tech, and you certainly need to have an understanding of security, but you don't have to have the deep technical skills. You do have to have those softer interpersonal skills, absolutely. This question does go on, and this one I'll have to answer. And how open are cybersecurity opportunities in Australia to non-residents? Well, it depends on the organisation that you're applying to. Many organisations in this country, particularly those who are government or reliant upon government funding, will need to have permanent residents or Australian citizens in their team. So that's the long and the short of it. So it's about understanding the environment and asking the question up front, is this role open to non-residents of Australia? Another one is, if soft skills are so valued or critical, are they transferable, and are they more valued than technical skills when you're hiring someone?
Joe, I'll let you answer if they're more valuable, but I do think that they are transferable, especially, something like critical thinking. If you can think critically in an audit capacity, you can probably learn more about security and begin to be a critical thinking cybersecurity professional. Well, I'll let you weigh on the technical skill piece.
Yeah, I think, look, quite honestly, to me, it's a case of half-half. You absolutely need somebody who has the technical skills, particularly around some of the deeper work that we do. But the communication and critical thinking skills are really, really important. The other thing about it too is that somebody had asked about tools. It's about your understanding. You might understand a little bit about, say, Splunk, but you're being asked for something entirely different, CrowdStrike. Well, you can learn that. That's something that you can learn. Those skills can be learned, but it's the other things that are harder to learn, right? So it depends on, again, how amenable the organisation that you're going to is to put you through some training or indeed walk you through their processes as well. So I think that question is a really good question. I think that soft skills are critical to what we do today. No longer can we speak just security jargon. We have to be able to speak the language of business. That's the most important part.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see the opportunities to move over into cyber requiring more technical hard skills? So that's sort of following on from that last question. I think hard skills are always important, as I've just said, but I think we've pretty much answered that, don't you, Sophia, that you need both.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And this person follows on and says, is it 50% technical, 50% soft skills, including analysis, change management, project management, etc.? Can I say that I think project management and change management are disciplines within themselves? I've been in that program management type role previously, and quite honestly, it's hard work. It's much easier to actually be on the technical side, I think. That's my perspective, only my perspective. So everybody is different. Some people might find it really rewarding, but it can be a real hiding as well. So, and as I say, change management to me it's almost a dark art type of non-hard science, but there's some people who are absolutely brilliant at it. And when you get them on one of your projects, it takes the pain away. So be aware of that. And that might be a path that you want to go down to. You want to specialise in change management around cyber or projects. Here we go. This one is, according to the statistics, it seems that organisations prefer experienced cybersecurity professionals and do not take as much risk on juniors entering the market. Will AI worsen this trend as junior work is relegated to AI agents and seniors are further hired and promoted?
One quick caveat I will add, and it's a good point. This survey was conducted among ISACA members. I'm not saying we don't have 18-year-old members, people who are brand new to the field, but a lot of people who receive this survey are people who are a bit more experienced. So I do want to add that. But yeah, Joe, do you think AI is at a point where it's replacing a junior cyber employee?
I don't think so. I think that there's still a need. I mean, how do you get to be a senior? You've got to be a junior first.
Exactly.
It might be the nature of the work that you do changes, but you still need to be a junior before you're a senior. It's the old thing about, you've got to crawl before you walk before you run. So I think that's really important. I also think that organisations are operating with less staff than they once did. So oftentimes it's easier to hire in somebody who has a mid-level range of skills rather than somebody who's fresh out of university, because that requires particular level of in-house training and someone to almost shadow that person to make sure that they're getting the training that they need and also doing the job that in the way that it needs to be done. So it is a really hard thing to swallow, but it's about how large is the organisation? have they offered internships previously? Because if they've offered internships, they're probably going to hire graduates as well. So again, you need to have a look at that before you make your jump.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this sounds like it might be coming from someone who's an academe. What are your suggestions for ensuring uni students graduate with the necessary skills for entry-level positions? Cyber is one of our most popular degrees or majors in IT, but we are struggling to find sufficient internship placements for cyber students. I kind of think we've just answered that. The reason is that we're operating with less budget, as we've seen from a survey, and we're also operating with less staff than we once did. So therefore, that capacity to actually properly care for graduate students as they come in, because it is a duty of care, I think is a little bit on the back burner, which is really unfortunate, because we need to be encouraging younger or people who have changed careers and are doing a degree to do that. One of the ways in, though, is not to go straight into cyber. One of the ways in is to look at doing something like a service desk role for a while, because then you really pick up the technology side of security as well. And I think that's often really important. And those people who have had to crawl around in a data center or under a desk or whatever suddenly has a different appreciation of their client groups as well. So think a bit laterally as well. I think that's helpful. And that might also help when you're looking at internship opportunities, if you look a little bit left of centre on stuff. And why do you think credentials held rates higher with employers than a university degree?
So part of it, again, is the ISACA audience. A lot of people who completed this survey got continuing professional education for their certifications, an incentive to do that. So the people who completed the survey likely have a certification and their employer values it. So some of it is the pool of people who responded. But I think, we were talking about this previously. University degrees are valuable, but not necessarily a prerequisite to succeed in a cybersecurity career. You may not have a degree, or you may have a degree in an entirely unrelated field and still do very, very well in cybersecurity. So I think for a lot of organizations, and tell me if it's different, Joe, in Australia, but they require a university degree when you're applying to the job, but they don't fundamentally care. They're not going to ask to see a transcript. It's almost just a check the box. And in some ways, it's almost serving as a barrier of entry for some people. I'm just curious to hear if it's like that there as well.
Yeah, look, for me, it's about having a degree shows that you've been able to synthesize information. It shows that you've got some level of communication skill. And it also, for me, shows a level of critical thinking, because you've had to do that to work through a degree. So that's what it says to me. I mean, I have three postgraduate certification or qualifications from university. And my master's degree was in educational psychology, which I have to say I do use on a regular basis in this job. Mm-hmm. But so that's something that looks quite different. But it gives me a level of understanding. But I also have 5 postgraduate credentials, including 4 ISACA credentials and 1 ACS credential. So those are really important as well. And they're the ones that do, you've got CPEs, CPDs that you have to pick up for them. And that's what keeps you abreast of times and trends. And I think that's what employers see as important but I don't know that it's more important than a university degree, but I think that those postgraduate credentials are the things that that keep you up to date, because you have to keep them valid. I hope that answers the question. I felt like I waffled. I'm sorry if I did, Don. So Melissa has asked us, can an entry-level cybersecurity be ideal for business admin, medical admin roles? That's a hard one. My answer to that is going to be, I think that you need to have a look at what you really want. What do you really want out of your career? Would you be happy with working in those kind of environments? If the answer is yes, go for it. And it might be that business admin role has a cyber piece to it that really interests you. Do it. So I think it's horses. Again, I use this phrase often. It's horses for courses. What do you want to do? How do you want to achieve? What's the organisation that you're going to offer you? Are their values aligned to your values as well? And that includes the benefits that Sophia talked about earlier. So that might be training. It might be having your memberships paid for to ISACA and ACS, for instance. They're all the things that you need to consider. And that, Sophia, is the end of our questions, and we're pretty much spot on time, which I think is wonderful.
Perfect.
And I would like to just say that I did a quick calculation looking at the chat, and I think we had people represented from 5 countries and 8 US states. So thank you all for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And that brings us to the end of our industry insights. And I can't thank Sophia enough. She does such a great job with her presentations and the work that she does on the surveys themselves. So just before we wrap up, I want to let you know about some of the benefits that you have access to as an ACS member. Your ACS membership comes with various benefits to help you continue your professional development and extend your skills and abilities and advance your career. You can scan the QR code to find out more. And if you're not a member already, this is a great opportunity for you to consider signing up. Thank you all again for joining us today. Please take a minute to complete our post-event survey via the pop-up link. We're dedicated to providing you with better experiences, so your feedback is really valuable to us. For our ISACA members, after viewing this webinar, you're eligible to claim 1 CPE, hard-earned 1 CPE. This event will also be made available on YouTube for on-demand viewing over the next 365 days. Yeah, that's a whole year from today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and please enjoy the rest of your day. And Sophia, again, thank you so much for everything that you do.
Thank you.